We just finished the scrum where we're in with President Trump's first cabinet meeting. And next, we are going to be, hopefully, heading into the signing ceremony, which right now is listed as closed press, and they're being pretty tight-lipped about what it's going to be about. But hey, hopefully it might be something juicy to tell you about. I'll see you soon.
Well, that is Chris Bedford. He participated in the White House press pool today in the new media spot, and he joins us now to break it all down. So, Chris, tell us what it was like, your first experience. You're out there representing Blaze Media for the first time. So tell us what this was like for you.
You know, the first thing is it was really harrowing to hear my opening video there, because it's a reminder that I kind of sound like Brett Kavanaugh. I always thought I sounded more like Darth Vader. But anyways, it's funny. It's been a wild trip. Much of pool duty is kind of like waiting in an airport, wondering if the plane's mechanical issues are going to be resolved. Just waiting, and then suddenly it's a whole lot of action. And then in this case, we were bustled into a room with the cameras and a couple of reporters who were selected. This was the first time in history a new media reporter has been selected to be part of the pool. And there was, of course, some grumbling about that. There was a Huffington Post reporter, for example, who he was, as of yesterday morning, slated to be the print reporter. Instead, my colleague from Axios was doing that. So there was a little bit of grumbling, but generally friendly people. And then you walk in, and it's kind of wild, Trump's cabinet, when you think about it. I was just looking around the room. Usually when you have a White House cabinet, it's a lot of names that you're learning for the first time, people from the private sector, maybe some politicians. How many of the people in there you recognize, guys? How many of the people are known to the American public beforehand? It reminded me of Trump's promise in the 2016 that he was going to bring together the smartest people, the best people, only the best, to advise him. And that the room was filled with a lot of that, interesting characters. Of course, you had Elon Musk sitting on the left side of the room, of the cabinet room from where we walked in. Took some questions as well. Howard Lutnick taking questions, and President Trump holding court. And it was also kind of a great experience because, especially compared to the last administration, we had about 45 minutes to an hour of being able to ask questions of the president. And of course, there's that. I try not to be too rude, but you kind of do have to push and throw some elbows and get your question in to get attention, because there's a lot of other people there who really want to ask about their own stupid stuff and not the things that I think are more interesting to the American people.
So tell us about Elon, because I see already, right, we have journalists yelling about how Elon Musk is running the cabinet. You were there. You saw how this went down. How would you describe Musk's relationship to the cabinet and how he was acting today?
It's completely false from all these different people. I mean, you have to keep in mind, the only person who's in that entire room, including the press, who was actually elected to that position was Donald Trump. Everyone else was appointed. So some of them were confirmed. Elon Musk was sitting along the outside wall. He wasn't sitting at the main cabinet table. He's not a member of the cabinet or someone who's at cabinet level. And there was a lot of different people along the back. You might have seen Stephen Miller there, for example. And when he was called upon by the president, who he called the commander-in-chief in his remarks, when he was called upon to answer questions that were specific to what he was working on and he was advising on, then he gave answers in joining with the president. And you saw that with actual cabinet secretaries as well. The president would say, well, why don't you answer these questions about what we're working on here, whether you're at the Commerce Department or wherever. Maybe this question is best for you. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, answered some questions as well. So this is a narrative that reporters, like many narratives and many reporters, walked in with. They decided Elon Musk is in charge of this cabinet meeting. Neither in seating, nor in his deferential treatment, nor in the way he responded, nor in the way he answered questions was that the case. But they'd already planned it, so they're going to go with it.
Well, Bedford, I want you to think back to about like November 4th or so and say, you know what, in a couple months, I'm going to be sitting in a cabinet meeting with Elon Musk, and I'm going to ask him a question about Social Security, and he's going to do pulse checks. We did pulse checks, by the way, here already. We're all good. We're alive. We can actually go through and claim any benefits that we need from the federal government. But what was that moment like for you, just kind of going through, and then Elon's response?
We expected it. We all sat down here at Blaze, and we knew this was coming. This was a time to really work and to get in there and to have access to be able to tell our listeners, our viewers, our readers about what's actually going on here in Washington, to get the questions that matter before the people that matter. Of course, when it actually does happen, it's a little bit of a I better not screw this up moment. You always get that pressure. I still get that pressure, and I'm just waiting to call into the show or to beam in every night. All right, be able to do your best, bring your best. People are tuning in. People are subscribing. They want to actually see what you can do, and they want to know something that a lot of other folks that have billion-dollar budgets and cable news aren't actually telling them and are hiding from them, or at least don't think is worth their while. So that was excellent. But I tell you what, I was in a bunch of meetings. I was in the Oval Office. I was in the cabinet room in the first president's term. And for all the whining and all the complaining you hear about access, I got this year. I must have Joe Biden's invitation for me to come to the Oval Office and the cabinet room must have been lost in the mail, because that administration was not sending them out. And you hear all this stuff and all this crying. And there's a lot of confusion right now in the press school over how this is going to work, because it is a very complicated schedule. There's a lot of people who are trying to plan their lives. You saw reporters today looking around saying, I guess I should call my husband or wife to pick up the kids from daycare. There's no lid been called yet, which is when the press pool ends and you're no longer responsible for this aspect of reporting. The president's day is done. And things can get crazy very quickly. You could end up in a motorcade. The president could decide to go to Trump, try to go to one of his hotels or out to dinner. And then you have to call home and say, darling, I'm not going to make it home for supper. You and the kids are going to have to be on your own. All those logistics are going to have to be worked out by the White House in particular, and there's still a lot of confusion over how that's going to look.
Well, Chris, we have to say you came in and did a hell of a job walking in there and getting a question from Elon Musk. One of the central questions that everyone's asking in America about, are these people going to be fired or not? So we much kudos to you. You did a championship job today. I want to go into that tension and conflict within the media itself. I mean, it probably is worth explaining a little bit about how this has worked in the past and why they're so mad, and tell us a little bit more about how you see this playing out. Because the way I look at it, it looks like Trump just came in there and stirred up the hornet's nest. You posted a picture of people saying, well, they stand with the AP. So these people seem like they're up in arms right now.
They are. There's certain people, although it wasn't as aggressive and mean and catty as it sometimes can be today. I was in there with James Rosen, also from Newsmax, and a reporter from Axios who'd been tapped, and none of us had been in that pool rotation. Rosen hadn't been to a cabinet meeting since George W. Bush's second term, so it was kind of a return for him to come back in there and cover that. And I'd tell you, for all the self-righteousness of some of the reporters, there was a few who could have been more polite. There's definitely some mean looks. The people, the job of a pool reporter is not simply to respond to their outlet they work for, but to be able to inform other members of the media who are not allowed in there and the wires what is going on, what the times are, who's in the room. And you can see from the cabinet room itself is hard to film. And you have to have a stationary shot on the president of the United States the entire time, and you've only got a little bit of time to set that up. So who's talking? Someone's off camera right now. It's not like the cameras can just suddenly swirl around and you see exactly who's talking. And you're kind of helping establish the permanent record. So even those reporters who were jerks, and I expect might be kind of mean in the future, rude, were satisfied when they were getting all the answers they needed and they realized the sky hadn't fallen in. And now what's settling in is confusion, because the White House Correspondents Association, which chooses who's in the pool representing what they have rotations, they have shifts, channels and outlets pay into a pot that pays for travel on Air Force One or travel on the chartered press flight that might be following Air Force One, to make sure there's someone going abroad, that there's someone going around domestically, and that there's always someone here in Washington when the pool is actually open. Are just kind of trying to figure out the logistics of this whole thing. So, okay, well, we're not in charge anymore. Who is in charge? And how is this going to shake out with the White House Correspondents Association no longer in charge of who's invited into the press room in the first place, or who's covering, if they're going to put a left-wing reporter from Huffington Post on there who the administration thinks lies about that? Why is that person picked? Well, you're probably not going to see that reporter being picked nearly as often anymore going into the future. You're going to see fresh blood. You're going to see new media outlets that aren't actually 20 years old, like the Huffington Post is, answering some of these questions and asking these questions of powerful people in the cabinet and in the White House.
Well, Chris, before you went into the White House today, I was up early this morning reading your Beltway brief, and I found it very interesting because you're saying right now the Democrat governors are talking a big game, but they're actually quietly pushing the Trump agenda. So how is Donald Trump even getting the Democrat governors to push the mandate right now?
So the Democrat governors, who seem to have a better political sense of what's going on than a lot of Democrat members of Congress and senators, these are people who are eyeing the White House and would like to be the presidential nominee for the Democrats in the future. And they've realized that 5 years of catering to kind of a left-wing revolution we've had since George Floyd and COVID and everything else that happened hasn't won them points with a lot of American voters. And Donald Trump has now won with a national majority. So even as much as Trump is leading the way in that, and they're seeing the polls about what's popular and what's unpopular, what he's doing is actually surprising them and how popular it is. Those people who do want to be president are trying to change course. I mean, you have J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, out there saying that this, in his State of the State address, that Donald Trump's rise reminds him of the rise of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler. But at the same time, you see him taking hundreds of millions of dollars of the state budget away from paying for health care for illegal immigrants. You see Gavin Newsom establishing a $50 million fund to be able to sue Donald Trump and stop his actions from the White House. But at the same time, you see him telling his legislature, actually, no, we're not going to use taxpayer dollars for illegal immigrants into American homes that they now own. This is not what we're interested in doing. And all across the board, the rhetoric is definitely tempered from 2017 to 2020. It is still rhetoric. It is still political, but the actions are things that you can tell they're going to want to say on that debate stage when they're challenged. No, I stopped that program. No, I changed that budget. No, I cut that spending, because that's what the American people have been responding to.
Well, Chris Bedford, thanks for making everybody here at Blaze Media look good today. You indeed did such a good job.
I look forward to going again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bedford. And MP, I think that it's one of those things where we just look and kind of say, this is a really big moment right now for Blaze Media.
Yeah, I mean, we don't make the story about us, but this story is important for everybody out there and for our audience, because this is something where, you spend years of your life moving to try to make the media a better place, doing the hard work of journalism as Chris has done. And then you have these moments where all of a sudden you do win, and we are winning. And the Trump administration understands that we need a free, fair, and balanced process when it comes to media. So it's an enormous moment for Blaze and all the people who've worked so hard here for so long. And I was overjoyed that Chris was the one who was there, and then he was able to ask Elon that question personally. This is good stuff, and it's just the beginning of what we have in store for all of you.